Okay, everybody, I want to say welcome back to these discussions that we're having over the subject of discipleship. I am glad that you are able to join us once again. I know that I was talking to somebody the other day and they said they weren't always able to join us live, but they got the videos later. That's great. I love that. As always, this is our Bible class format. We love, if you're on live with us, love to have questions from you. Just go ahead and throw those out there. We'll try to address those as we go. If you have questions over something and you weren't able to watch it live, that's okay. Throw those in the comments down there or shoot us a message. We'd love to be able to address that, answer any questions, or maybe talk about some areas that you haven't seen. We'll have to work on how we do that. Formats may be changing with, again, the city of Enid is ever opening things back up, so the format may have to change as far as frequency or when. I'll have to work all that out, and we'll see how that plays out for everybody's schedule in the upcoming future. Also, we've got a lot of camps coming up this summer, so, well, not a lot. We've got some in comparison. A camp. We got a couple online camps. Does that count?
Okay, that's true.
Okay, all right. So we've got some things that may tie us up. We may have to take a break for a few weeks or so while we make some adjustments. So just kind of be aware that there might be some changes coming up, and we may not be always on at this time, and we'll have to figure all that out and let you know what's coming. All right. Just a quick recap.
And Josh is going to be leaving.
Yeah, Josh is leaving. Josh is heading out. He's got a camp.
Video in. We're fine.
Yeah. Josh has got a camp, and then he's going to do a ministry internship up in Seattle, Washington. So way up there, like way far away from Enid, Oklahoma. I don't know.
Did you know?
So
The weather's gonna be so much nicer than here, though.
I'll call you in the winter and we'll check on that.
I don't
You're
care.
good. Okay,
I
all
grew
right.
up in Massachusetts.
That's right. Yeah, you grew up in Massachusetts. Never mind. You're good. Okay. All right. So Josh will be kind of leaving. I don't know. Like I said, just a lot of changes coming up. We'll just see how it goes, and we'll just see what we end up with in the end. We have been started last week, talking about 4 different areas or spheres of somebody's life that they need to be discipled in. We talked about briefly, just kind of a recap. The primary area that when you, as a disciple maker, when you're discipling somebody, that they need to be discipled in is their relationship with Jesus Christ. As they start this journey, you need to walk with them, you need to lead them and guide them to Jesus. And you need to make sure that they're growing in that, right? We need to make sure that they're growing in their understanding of what the Bible teaches about Jesus, about their relationship with Jesus. We need to make sure that they're understanding not just head knowledge, but that they are developing that trust and that reliance on God through their relationship with Jesus Christ, and that they're developing a love for God and for the things of God. And then we talked about the idea of how are they serving Jesus? How are they moving and working? And so all of those are different things. Are there skills that we need to teach them to help them grow in their relationship with Christ? All that kind of concept. And we're basing this off of the book of Ephesians. If you remember from last week, in Ephesians, he begins by giving some introductory stuff, and then the very next part, there in chapter 2, he kind of starts talking about their relationship with Christ. And then in chapters 2 and 3, and then you get to chapter 4 of Ephesians, and he kind of, towards the end of 3, beginning of 4, he kind of talks about the idea of their relationship, not just with Christ, but with Christ's body, meaning the church. And so the thing that we talked about last week was discipling them in the area of their relationships with the church body, right? Are they growing not only in their love for Christ, but in their love for Christ's people, and their love for each other with the brethren? We talked about the idea of do they understand what the church is about and what their role in the church is, and all those kinds of concepts. And then how are they serving the church? Are they active and involved and engaged, or how do we need to help them grow along in those lines? And so that's chapters 3 and 4. Then Paul goes right into that, and if you're looking in the following through with the book of Ephesians, he talks about the life that they should be living. And then in chapter 5, as he goes through there, he gets into talking about the idea of walking purely, and he talks about their relationships not with just their church family, but he deals with the next area that people need to be discipled in, and that's their relationships with their physical family. The idea is when we're discipling somebody, a lot of times we have this tendency to focus in on the godly stuff, right? We'll focus in on Jesus and God, and we'll focus in on the church and service to the church. What's the problem with that?
That's not daily living. That's not walking the Christian life. If we only focus on the spiritual stuff, there's a whole other part of that goes with it. I don't know if I'm making sense, but I know what I'm trying to say.
Okay. There is more to it than that, right? Sometimes we get caught up on the public stuff, right? What everybody sees, the stuff that, oh, they led a great prayer, oh, they read scripture so well, or oh, they did a good job doing the song leading, or whatever it is. And we focused on that kind of stuff. But that's only one sphere of life. There's a whole other section of their life that deals with, are they godly not just in front of the church family, but are they godly at home with their family? Because I'll be honest with you, I've met people who do a great job of putting on a good face at the church building. But when you go home, you're like, hey, where's that speak kindly to one another at home? Where is that, be patient with each other at home? And so I think Paul kind of knew that. One of the interesting things about when you study the New Testament, the people in the Bible times, when they were coming to know Jesus, Christianity was brand new. And so families would come to know Christ, and so they would be Christians, but they would not know how to be a Christian family. Right? And so they would, and sometimes I think people were in the same boat. We teach them what it is to know Jesus. Okay, yay, you're a Christian. Now we start trying to get them involved in the church work. Okay, good. But then we stop. And the problem is, they might be a Christian, and they might know how to interact with God's family, but they are falling short in how they interact with their own family. Yes?
I have a couple of thoughts about that. First of all, it's human nature that we don't often think about. I mean, if you have a really bad day at work, you're not going to take that out on your boss. You're going to wait till you get home, and you're going to take it out on your spouse or on your children because they're safer. And, our family is our safe place because they're the people that we know are going to be there no matter what. But at the same time, we need to be conscious of the fact that our family is our safe place so that we don't take advantage of them in that way. We need to be extra conscious of that so that we can say, okay, I've had a bad day at work. I need to be really careful when I get home so that I don't take it out on my family. And my second thought is the fact that it is not uncommon for ministers' children to be unfaithful to the Lord.
Right.
And I think there's a couple of reasons for that fits with this discussion. First of all, I think it's because sometimes preachers are hypocritical. They get up in the pulpit and they say one thing and they tell people that you should be loving and you should be kind and you should speak gently and things like that. But then that's not how they are at home.
Absolutely.
And so their hypocrisy turns their children away from the Lord. But then also, if ministers are not hypocritical, a second trap that they can fall into is neglect. Because they are so focused on the church and the Lord's work with the church, they give everything they have to them and they have nothing left to give to their family. So while they may not be necessarily living ungodly at home, they're not making sure the emotional and spiritual needs of their family are met, and it has the same effect.
Right. Yeah, I agree with what Lacey's saying. So, a couple of words of caution. If you are in church leadership, whether you're a minister or an elder or a deacon, keep in mind that your children are the ones that see you day in and day out. They know whether or not what you say publicly is the same thing you do at home, or whether you try to make those. They're not always going to be the same because nobody's perfect, okay? You're going to lose your temper, then you're going to have to repent. It's going to happen, okay? That's the way it works, right? But your children will see whether or not you're actually trying to live the life, or if you're just telling everybody they need to live the life and then go home and do what you want. And so we have to make sure that we're not hypocritical. And here's something most people struggle with. They'll say, oh, but I love the Lord. Well, does it reflect in your home life? Because if you're having trouble getting your kids to engage in Christ-like behaviors, it might be because your focus at home is off. They might be seeing you focus one way publicly and another way privately. And that's something that especially as church leaders, we really need to be aware of. Now, I want to say just a couple things about the neglect real quick, and then I'll get to your question. If you are a church leader, you need to make sure you carve out some time for your family. Don't let the quote-unquote needs of the church always trump your family. That is not okay. This was told to me in preaching school, and I believe it. You chose to be a minister, right? That's something that you chose to go into as an occupation. Your children didn't choose to be your children. You made that choice. And so you are called to be a father. God has placed you in that position if you have children. And so that is your first and foremost obligation. I believe that the Scripture bears this out. You look in Timothy and Titus, and one of the hallmarks of being a church leader is that you are a good family leader. And so if you neglect your family to try to lead the church, you are failing in both areas. And so do not neglect your family. Carve out some time for them. Make sure that they know that they have a priority spot in your life and in your heart, because that's what God has. You don't have a choice about that. That's something that you will be held accountable for. You can choose whether or not to engage in ministry or not. And so, and I'll be honest with you, if it comes down to choosing between your family and the ministry, choose your family. Choose your family. Put them first. Find a secular job and put them and their needs where it needs to be. Because in the end, I'll be honest, I would consider it one of my biggest failures for me to realize that in trying to save everybody else, I lost my children. Because that's not what God has called us to do. And so, just a couple of things. What was your...
Also, can I point out, not just like your immediate family, but also like extended family too, especially like if they're non-Christians and you're trying to bring them to the faith. They're going to notice how you act, and if you're acting one way whenever you're around your Christian friends and another way whenever you're around them. So that's also something to take into consideration. And also, especially if your immediate family, like if you're the only Christian in your immediate family, it's going to be all the more important for you to show that you're not just putting on a face whenever you go to the church,
right.
That you're actually living the Christian life. Otherwise, they're not going to see a need for it.
Right, and you're exactly right. It has to be consistent. It has to be your love for the Lord shining forth.
I think an interesting test that you could do with yourself is in preparation for going to a church service, honestly look at yourself and say, do I feel different than I do the rest of the week? Does it feel like I have to change myself to make appearance in this scenario? Because if you do, then you're doing something wrong. You're either not living a Christian life, or you're trying to act holy when really you're not.
Yeah. No, and I think that's exactly right. The only difference you should feel on Sunday versus the rest of the day is excitement that you get to go worship God with the family of God.
Right,
That's
right.
That's the only difference that should really be there. Other than that, you should be magnifying and glorifying God in your everyday life. So you're exactly right, Josh. If we're putting on a show, we might fool everybody else, but the one person we're not fooling is the one person that we put on the show for, and that's God. He sees us at home as well as at the church building. So don't do that.
And something that just came to my mind whenever you said that is you say putting on the show for God, but I don't know if that's the case. I think whenever you put on a show, it's for other people, and that's not the purpose of going to worship. If you're going to worship to like seem holy in front of other people, you got a lot of things wrong.
That's right. What that means is your relationship with Christ needs to grow stronger, and that's something I want to come back to later on. So when you're discipling somebody in this area, what you need to do is you need to say, okay, let me figure out where you're at in your relationships with your family. If you're a woman and you're discipling another woman, is she one that understands what submission to her husband means? Is she willing to do that? Is she willing to submit to her role? If it's a child that you're discipling, are they willing to obey their parents? Or do they struggle in that area? If it's a man, if you're a man discipling another man, is he willing to step up and take that leadership role and love his wife as Christ loved the church, and bring his children along with in the training and admonition of the Lord, but not making them despair because of the way he treats them and acts at home. And so all of these kinds of familial roles that he deals with right here are things that we need to make sure we're discipling them in. When we're discipling somebody, we need to kind of assess, how are you doing with your family? How's it going? Is there an area in which you're struggling? Because let's be honest, there are going to be times when we struggle, right? I think every young person can say that there have been times that they have struggled to be obedient to their parents. They look at them and they go, I don't want to. No, I don't want to. I don't want to. I don't want to. Right? Every kid has that moment. My guess is moments. And moments and moments and moments. All right? It's one of those things. I've never been in this situation, but I imagine there are times when a wife says, I don't want to submit to you. I think that decision is dumb. Right? Okay? Yeah, my wife laughs because we've had this conversation. Okay? All right? Yeah. And if you're honest, if you're a guy, there are times when you're like, man, I don't want to be the one that always has to make the hard call. God, why did you give this to me? I don't want to. Right? And so we're going to have times when we struggle.
Just on a note on that, that makes it seem like the decision making is all one-sided.
Oh, no.
There is an entire process that goes on where the wife should be able to come to the husband and say, hey, I think this is stupid. Let's think about this. Now, maybe in a kinder way, but the idea is that she should be able, in that relationship, she's not so far grounded underneath the husband that she can't have an opinion.
Agreed.
And the husband should be able to look at his wife, and honestly say, hey, I am not only willing, but I want to hear your opinion, because I'm not the only person in this relationship. I'm not the only one affected by these decisions. And frankly, I'm not necessarily the smartest all the time.
Yeah.
So that dynamic should not be so separated as much as just the final position of the role is that the husband makes the final call.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I agree with everything Josh just said. And here's what I believe about this. If you're doing it right, this will happen. If a wife feels like her husband loves her like Christ loved the church, well then she's going to feel safe enough to say, I disagree and here's why.
Right.
And if he really loves her as Christ loved the church, he's going to be willing to listen to that. At the same time, just because I listen to it does not mean that in the end I'm going to agree with it.
Right.
And if I disagree and I make a decision that is not the one that's liked by my wife, then her role then is to submit to that decision, whether she agrees with it in totality or not. And here's the flip side to that. I bear the responsibility for that. It's not like, oh, I made this decision, it was a dumb decision, and I get to go scot-free. No, that's not the way that works. As a man, if you make the dumb decision, then you better have the big enough shoulders to carry the weight of what's going to fall on you because of it. And so, yeah, you're exactly right. It's a whole cycle, and I think it's outlined very beautifully in Ephesians chapter 5, that marriage relationship. And what I love about this is we oftentimes talk about Ephesians 5 and say, oh, this is the relationship of husband and wife. Actually, Paul says, no, I'm really talking about Christ and the church. This is just the closest relationship I can come to that, And so we need to keep that in mind. Yeah.
And it's kind of interesting that we as the church haven't caught on to the fact that people need to be discipled in this sooner, because you can look at your congregation and see examples of young couples, and they know that the man's supposed to be the leader and that the wife is supposed to submit, and they know that they're supposed to work together and be a unit, but we don't teach them how to do that. We don't teach them how to have this and learn to work together to achieve a goal. We don't teach them how to communicate. We don't teach the woman how to be submissive whenever she disagrees with her husband. We don't teach the husband how he needs to move forward whenever something's gone wrong. And there's a lot.
Yeah, there is. There's a lot to this, and when we do that, it's called what? Discipleship. Imagine. I mean, wow, this thing just goes right around. Yeah.
There's a couple of things. A quote I heard at the Come Fill Your Cup retreat last fall that really stuck with me, that I loved so much, was this. The speaker said, submission begins when you disagree. It is very easy to submit, quote unquote, to a decision that you agree with because it's what you wanted anyway. It's not really submission until you disagree and you're willing to do so humbly and here's the thing, support and respect your husband in your decision.
Mm-hmm.
If you say, okay, well, I think that's really dumb, and I'm going to submit to you, but this is really dumb, and then you keep telling your husband how dumb it is, and then you proceed to give him the cold shoulder and tell him to sleep on the couch, that's not submission. Submission is when you respect and honor the decision that you disagree with.
Yeah.
In addition to that, just on a practical note, another passage that I think is vital for this, I don't know if you were going there or not, First Peter chapter 3, verses 1 through 7.
Mm-hmm.
And I think verse 7 is really key because it says, for husbands to live in their with their wives in an understanding way. But the reason it gives is so serious because he says, so that your prayers may not be hindered. This is a really big deal, and this is really important. And since you were going there anyway, I'm not going to belabor it, but this is vitally important. And just on the practical level, a couple of resources that are really, really fantastic to help husbands and wives live with each other in an understanding way. One of them is the 5 love languages. You can go to Google. You can Google 5 love languages quiz. I highly recommend that all couples take that because you can be showing your spouse love and they may not be getting it because you're not showing them in a way that they understand.
Right.
So the 5 love languages will help you understand how to show your spouse love in the way that they best understand. And that's really, really important. And then the second one is Dr. Willard F. Harley's book, His Needs, Her Needs,
Yes.
which is amazing. It's very practical, very easy to understand, very applicable, but it helps you and your spouse understand each other's most important emotional needs. You can't be understanding of their needs, you can't meet their needs if you don't know what their needs are.
Right.
And I know for me, when I was a young bride, I couldn't tell you what my needs were because I didn't understand them myself.
Right.
And it helped me understand my own needs. And so just for a couple of practical resources, I think those are fantastic. And just also another plug, there's nothing wrong with marriage therapy. I don't think there are couples in this world that would not benefit from Christian counseling from a qualified Christian therapist to help them through their marriage. And so if you're having issues, be humble enough to get help.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'll zip it now.
Yeah. No, you're good. Those resources you mentioned are really great. If you have not read those books, I agree. I highly recommend them. The 5 love languages and His Needs, Her Needs, both great resources.
I'll put links in.
Lacey's going to post some links for you guys. Great resources to read and to try to use as a starting place for conversations. But yeah, the 1 Peter passage is so great. It fits right in with this. And verse 7 for us men is very, very powerful. We have to live with our wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. You know, this is the part that I think some young men don't understand is how they live with their wives. And some older men, I'll just throw that out there. Okay? How you live with your wife affects your relationship with God. And that's something that when you're discipling somebody, especially a young man, that's something that they need to understand is they can't just turn it on at the church building. It has to be at home too, because how they live with their wife affects not just this relationship, but it affects this relationship. And that's something that we need to help people understand, because we don't, as Riel said, typically speaking, congregations don't do a good job of this. We just kind of, people get married and we're like, yay, you're married, good luck. And then we walk away going, yeah, we give it like a week before they have their first big blow up, right? That's what we do. Instead of saying, let us walk beside you through that big blow up. We're like, oh no, we can't stick our nose in their business. Well, listen. Sometimes young people need a little bit of wisdom and guidance so that they don't have to hit their head as hard as we did because we didn't have it.
I would appreciate that.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Yes.
I also wanted to say something about the whole husbands like living in an understanding way with their wives. That's not all on the husbands. Wives need to pay attention to their attitudes and their behavior, because if they're being very difficult, that's going to make it difficult for her husband to have a good relationship with God. So, I mean, both parts need to do their part on that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. Both people need to do their part. if you've been around me, my wife learned this lesson the hard way, and you start acting that way, I'm just going to say, you know what? When we figure out how to talk about this normally, we can talk about it. Until then, I'll be over here and you can be over there. I have so much of a limit, and then I'm like, okay, I've got to work on my love because I'm falling short. It's one of those things, and I think every couple can relate to that. And if you can't, you're probably in that honeymoon puppy love phase that will fade away, and then when reality strikes, shoot me a message and we'll talk. Okay?
I think one important thing in all relationships in the Bible that you actually see is that there are different roles that are meant to be played in any of the relationships, whether it's child to parent, spouse to spouse, disciple to discipler, church member versus church leader. Any of them, there are different roles. But if you actually look at them, there is not a single instance where those relationships, where the lesser is actually considered as lesser, but just in a different role, a role of submission. And not to say that there's not an emotional side to it, but if you actually look at it, if you look at some of the laws of like socialism in the idea of how things work together, these are extremely practical. These are how things work. It's not we create such a huge gender battle, such a battle against old and youth. Like there's just so much contention created because we feel like we're making one person lesser than the other. And that's not what the Bible does. The Bible just says, hey, this is the place where you're at right now, and to achieve a better life standard, this is the role you need to fulfill. And that's not demeaning. In fact, that is extremely helpful. And if we can change our perspective and look at it as a positive thing, as a cheat sheet for life, to say, oh, so this is what I need to do to get better, then all of a sudden this becomes a fantastic read and not a chore.
Right, absolutely. I like that. That's a great way. We need to learn to shift our perspective. That's a great thought. Yes.
One more thing, and I put this in the discussion on the Facebook post, but I specifically mentioned 5 love languages in regards to marriage. But if you're looking at that, there's also a specific one for children and a different one for teenagers. That is an excellent resource for parents to help you show your children love in the ways that they need most and in the ways that they understand most. So, I mean, if you're a parent, it is more than worth your time to sit down with your children and have them go through those as well.
Absolutely, yes. I agree with that too. So look for the ones on parenting.
Just having that knowledge about somebody that you're spending time with, even like in friendship. I'm not married and I'm not a parent, so I don't know that. But that helps with friendship also, just because you understand more about what that person needs from you in the friendship relationship.
Right. And in the discipling relationship. Those kinds of knowledges can help you to connect with the person that you're discipling in a way that's meaningful to them. And so, yeah, these are great tools to have.
Well, because love is very little is it actually talking about a spousal relationship in the Bible. The majority of love is not talking about that at all.
That's exactly right.
It just happens to apply to that realm as well.
Right. And so when we're discipling somebody, we need to ask, do they understand their role, right? How it all supposed to work. And not just do they understand that, but are they growing in their love for each other as a family? Have you ever been around those families where you're like, why did you text your kid to come to dinner? They're in their bedroom. Like, just go knock on, you ever been around that? Like, we need to make sure that they're growing in their love for each other. Do they enjoy spending time together as a family? Or do they do this all the time and pick at each other and it's not any fun to be around that? Are they growing, are they willing to, like we said, submit to that role of their family when they get there? Also, do they have the relational skills that they need to be the family? I'll be honest, if you didn't grow up with good communication skills, those are hard to learn. And that's something that we should be looking at with those that we're discipling. Can you communicate with your spouse? Can you communicate with your children? Can your children communicate with you? Because you might be trying but missing simply because you don't know how to communicate effectively. That's something that we could do. Is that home a place that's centered on following Jesus? That's something that you're not going to learn by Sunday morning assembly attendance only. You're going to have to be in their life. You're going to have to be in their home. They're going to have to be in your home. Those are the things that we need to be looking for. And so that's the one area that I think really needs some attention, especially in our American culture where the family structure is disintegrating more and more. That's something we need to really be aware of. All right, the last area that people need to be discipled in, as you keep going down the book of Ephesians, he talks about bondservants and masters, and I'm going to and he kind of goes on through the rest of this, and he kind of starts talking about the world and that kind of stuff. I'm going to kind of relate that back to our present day culture. And I'm going to say that's kind of like the work or school relationship. This is where you interact with the world, right? He says if you're a Christian master, then you treat your slaves well. If you're a Christian bondservant, then you work as to the Lord and not as eye pleasers for men. You do your job well. And so I think when we talk about discipling somebody, that one of the things that we need to talk to them about is how are things going at work, or how are things going at school. Depending on where they're at in their life, right? Okay, because they need to understand that Christianity, again, their relationship with Jesus is central, but then it spreads out from that, and it affects their church life, it affects their family life, and it affects how they interact with the world and what people see. Because what people see in you, they're supposed to see Jesus reflected from you. The light of God is supposed to shine forth from us to this world of darkness. And so that's going to be really important as we talk with them and disciple them in how they interact with the world. Okay? Have you ever met those people that you see on Sunday, but when you see them on Tuesday, you're like, whoa, what kind of person are you? Because what they did on Sunday at worship and who they are on Sunday when they're around their Christian family is not who they are when they're around at work or around school. That's something, when you see that, that's immaturity. That's an area that they need to be discipled in, and they need to grow in their understanding of what their relationship with Jesus means in that area of their life.
Something that came to my mind is your boss is going to notice whenever you have a different attitude than your coworkers, or whenever you have a different work ethic, or things like that. Like you don't lie calling in sick whenever you're not actually sick because you want the day off or whatever. They're going to notice whenever you do those things. But also, if you have a Christian family member, like a member of the body, who has recommended you for that job, how you behave and how you work at that job is a reflection back on them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also something that we really need to keep in mind, because we can shed a bad light on ourselves, yes, but we can also shed a bad light on our fellow Christians by how we behave at work. Because I know that that's something that I'm worried about sometimes. It's like, what if I completely mess up here? And then it's looked out on them.
Well, and school teachers, if you've got one kid who says yes ma'am and yes sir and no ma'am and no sir, please and thank you, as opposed to the rest of the class who doesn't, that's noticeable. But then if your kid is the one who starts fights or who pulls hair and spits and bites at people, then that reflects poorly on the parents. And so it's that same idea, just in a younger age.
Yeah, well, it's those same concept of you meet somebody and they're like, you see how they act, and they're like, hey, do you want to go to church with me? And you're like, you go to church? Where? And the thought in your mind is not, oh, I want to go there. It's, I'm never going there. If that's what it is, right? Okay, that's the idea. If you react that way, other people will too. And so we need to be aware, and we need to help people when we disciple them. We need to help them realize that that's what's going to be expected and seen in them, and that's the kind of inferences that people are going to draw.
Well, this is exactly what he's talking about when he says, do not be conformed, be transformed. The idea is that if you're conformed, then it means that you don't have a strong inner core value that is able to resist the change of the world, and so you basically just put on the clothing of wherever you're at. So you can act churchy or you can act worldly just because it's surface level. Whereas if you're transformed, then your entire being is actually different to the point where the influences that may be coming at you, whether they are churchy or worldly, are going to basically bounce off because it's not where you're finding how you act. Where you act is found in a different source, in a transformed mind and body.
That's right. And that's exactly right. That word means coming from the inside out.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's metamorpho. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great concept. If you've not studied that word, go study it. It's great. Okay.
But talking about this discipleship concept with families, the truth is sometimes there are going to be Christians whose kids are the ones that are hitting and pulling hair and spitting on people or whatever, because like Riel was saying earlier, we say we'll raise godly children. We don't walk people through how to do that. What does godly parenting look like? What does biblical parenting look like? How do I do this? How do I parent the heart of my children instead of parenting their behavior? What does that even mean? And so we have to disciple our young families in how to do this. And sometimes it means you do this. Sometimes it means sharing with them what we did wrong and be like, whatever you do,
don't do this. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
But that goes back to the transparency that's so important. But to disciple, we have to get down in the mess with the person.
That's right.
We have to be around that hooligan child to help the parent find out how to discipline their child effectively. We have to have that relationship. We have to be there with them. We're certainly not going to help them by sitting over on the other side of the auditorium going, do you see how that child is acting? Do you see what they're doing? Yep. That doesn't help anybody. We've got to be in the mess with them.
Absolutely. You have to be willing to step in that with them and be right there and walk with them and deal with it. Okay, I think a lot of church problems with that, behavior problems, would be addressed simply if, instead of sitting there and passing judgment on somebody, if we got up and walked over there and sat beside their kid and said, I'll go sit down just a little bit. And you helped them out. Now, if you don't have a good relationship with that person, if you're not helping grow, they're going to probably get a little offended at you. I'm just going to say, all right? But if that's how you are and everybody knows that's how you are and that's who you are and you're trying to help everybody, they're not going to get offended. My wife has gotten on to me several different times because I have disciplined people's own children in front of them when the parent wasn't disciplining them. But I'm like, no, that's not okay. And if they're not going to say something about it, I'm not going to do it ugly, but I am going to make a firm boundary of not around me, this does not happen. And my wife keeps saying, one of these days, somebody's going to tell you to keep your nose in your own business. When that happens, I might just have to form a new discipling relationship with some parents. It's just one of those things. But we need to be willing to step into the life of that person. And yeah, it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be clean. Ours isn't either. And hopefully, if you've been a disciple for a while, it's cleaner, it's neater. But somebody helped you, right? Hopefully, maybe. I'm praying that maybe somebody helped you. And if not, give other people what you didn't have but wish you did. Yeah.
There's a couple things I wanted to point out with this. So, once again, going back to if it's someone who's just coming in from the world and they don't have like any Christian family or anything like that, be careful with this because of what you're saying and us passing judgment. We can't expect them to immediately change. We can't expect their kids to immediately change. They're used to behaving and acting one way. They're used to one thing being okay. So they're not going to immediately change it. And we don't need to come down hard, especially not on the kids, for them behaving how they're used to behaving.
Well, not even just on the kids, on the parents too. New Christians have to be, we've already talked about this, so I'm not going to belabor it, but they have to be discipled. They have to grow in their own maturity before they can disciple their own children to more maturity. So yeah, we have to be patient. We have to lead, we have to guide, we have to walk beside. We might have to pick them up when they fall down because let me tell you, it is not easy to change the way you think about your children, your family, and the way you interact with your family and the way you parent your children. Those are not easy changes to make. They don't happen quickly. They happen slowly, a lot slower than what most people want them to. And we have to walk alongside and remind and love and gently correct and lead and guide and set the example ourselves. Now, I'll be honest with you. If you try to tell somebody to parent their child one way and they look at you and you're not parenting your child that way, they're going to tell you to go take a hike. And they may not say it with their words, but they're like me, they might. But if they're not, they're just going to look at you and go, okay. And they're going to kind of turn around and do whatever they want to do otherwise. Okay? So, yeah, we got to do all of those things.
I was talking and not looking, I'm sorry, but I think it was during the conversation on being transformed, not conformed, but Jason Baptiste commented and he said thermometer or thermostat.
There you go. I like it. Thermometer or thermostat. Yeah, I like that. Good. Yes.
Something else I wanted to point out, if there's a family and it's only like single parent, or if there's one parent that works a lot, you're going to have to disciple them in this manner differently, because they're going to have to be parenting a little bit differently. And also, they might need some more help than someone who has both parents there, just because there's more responsibility on that one parent. And they're going to be really tired from all the work and stuff that they're having to do. So just something to think about.
Oh, your time will come, my child. You will understand those statements so much better. But she's exactly right. If you have single parents that you're trying to help walk with, they're going to need more a lot of times. They're going to need more help. They're going to need more investment. They're going to need somebody to walk along beside and fill in a void that's missing in the lives of their children. That's something that we need to be aware of. We need to be willing to invest in that. And I think so many times we're not. As a church, we don't look at it that way. We don't try to step in and fill those voids. We just say, oh, well, they should do a better job. Well, guess what? They're one person, and if your family, if you were blessed to have two, you don't understand what it's like to be the only one parent. My mom was a single mom. There was 3 of us kids. I know for a fact we wore her out on certain days, okay? Just because of the emotional strain of constantly trying to wrangle 3 teenagers at the same time. I'm sure my mom, there were days my mom just went, I don't have anything else left to give. It's all been put out there. I'm done. I can't do anymore. And so, yeah, we might need to step in a little more. We might need to offer to have their kids come over. Give them a break. We might need to say, hey, why don't you come fishing with me? Or let's go hunting together. Or, hey, why don't you come over and have a girls' night with my girls? Or whatever the case is. And we might need to reach out and invest in them a little more. Yeah.
Kind of along the same lines, but a little bit different. Something else for us to really think out. If your congregation has a minister with young children, please reach out and support his wife. Because, preachers and preachers' wives, ministers' wives, we talk to each other. And way too often, I hear from younger ministers' wives that they feel ridiculed and judged and criticized because they're down there with young children by themselves every single service while their husband is preaching or teaching or, while he's in the public leadership of the worship assembly. They're alone. And that is really, really hard. And if your husband was always blessed to be with you and sit with you every worship service, you may not think about that. But if you have a young minister's wife that has young children, help her, support her, encourage her, but please don't criticize her if her children are not, people say, well, did you see how that preacher's kids were acting? Well, there's one of them, and there may be 3 or 4 of them, and that's like 6 hands, and it's young ministers' wives could, especially if their husband's the preacher and he's preaching during services, they could really use extra support and help and encouragement.
Oh, absolutely. I remember one time, as a young minister with young children, I was at a loss what to do. We had one kid sick, so Lacey needed to stay home. Had other kids that, we got to go to worship, right? And then, well, who are they going to sit with? Because Dad's going to be preaching. So what do we do with the kids? And they ended up sitting with an elderly woman in the congregation. And so do those kinds of things. Reach out and help. And be aware that they're going to have to be parents. They can't. Their kids are kids, just like your kids are. The same problems you have with them, they're dealing with at their own house.
They're not
Yeah,
superheroes.
ministers are not superheroes. Okay, they might put on a cape and try to fly around for you, but in the end, they have kryptonite too. They've got weak spots. They're gonna fail, and that's part of being human. So yeah, absolutely.
And that was the story of how I got called out from the pulpit.
Yes, that is. I didn't tell that part, but yes, that is how you got called down from the pulpit. That's right. But that's a whole different story for a different time, all right? But so, when we're discipling somebody, those are the things we need to think about. How are they doing? Do they understand their relationship with the world? You know, we need to say, do you understand what your role is at work or in this situation with these people or at school? Do you understand how you reflect God in those situations, right? Not only that, but we need to evaluate kind of how they're doing heart-wise, right? Do not just they understand here, but are they growing more for their love for God and less in their love for the world? Are they growing more towards God and leaving all the worldly things behind? It's not, like I said, it's not going to happen overnight, but are they making that progress? We need to look at that and say, how are they growing in these relationships? Are they developing a burden to reach out to those who are lost? You know, as we love God more and we understand more about what His will is for our lives, we're going to recognize those people that we used to hang out with need to know what we know. And we're going to start feeling like we need to reach out to them. Those people who are at our workplace, it's no longer a place where we go to work. We go there, yes, to earn a living, but also we might have the opportunity to teach somebody, to reach out, to share with them the news that we know about Christ. When we go to school, those aren't just our classmates anymore. They start developing this vision of, hey, these are people that need to know Jesus. You know, those are the kinds of things that we need to start doing. Are they, when we look at their lives, where are they spending the majority of their time? Do they spend the majority of their time serving self or serving Christ? Serving others? You know, when we need to start seeing them shift some of their focus in the practical things of how they live their life. You know, are they developing stewardship in their lives? This awareness of this time isn't really my time. These things aren't really my things. They are all given to me by God. I'm going to give them back for His glory. You know, that's when you start seeing maturity, is when they start realizing that the things of this world aren't so important, that the things of eternity are the important things. That's what we want to see. And we want to see it lived out in their lives more and more and more and more as they grow closer to God. And that's something that we need to be aware of as we disciple somebody in this area of their life.
And we should all be seeking to get to that point. So often we think of spiritual success as ourselves living a good life, but we are called to go beyond ourselves. In many cases, there are responsibilities that we have that don't have anything to do with us, but are the world, are the people around us, are the people that we are ministering to. We are called to minister to people. The words used is servant to people. That's what we're called to do. And if you feel like you're unprepared to do that, then you have some growth to do. Mm-hmm. It's not good enough to just feel like you live a good life. You have growth that until you reach a point, and even once you reach a point where you feel comfortable in teaching people and ministering to people and helping people with their lives, there's still always growth that needs to be made.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So now I want to kind of bring all of these 4 areas back together, okay? And I'm going to ask Josh and Andrew to think about this. When we get together, what do we talk about?
You want a verbal answer?
Yeah, verbal answer.
Life.
Talk about life. We talk about how things are going spiritually, right?
Right.
We talk about your relationship with Jesus. We talk about how things are going with your family. We talk about how things are going with the church.
Yep.
We talk about how things are going at school and how things are going at work, right?
Yep.
We talk about life. And that's what discipleship is. It's life on life. Because it's all connected. You can't separate them out. And here's the thing that's about this. If you see somebody struggling in one area, guess what that means? Yeah, they're going to struggle in others. And more importantly than that, that means that somewhere back, because here's how this works. The relationship with Jesus is centered, right? And then all these other areas connect. Lacey's got a graphic that she's going to share to kind of put this out there. But the relationship with Jesus is in the middle, and it kind of branches out into their church relationships, their family relationships, and their relationships with the world. And it feeds and dictates how these relationships grow and how they interact. Right? So if you see somebody struggling in an area, it means that they've probably got some area in their relationship with Jesus that they need some help with. there's something going on that they need to grow in. There's something going on that they need you to go back and help them strengthen and learn more about Jesus and learn how Jesus would interact in this situation with this relationship, however you want to see it. They need some help there. Okay? And so I want you guys to understand, when you're discipling somebody, when they start running into problems, you can help them work through that situation, but unless you go back to figure out what the deeper issue is and what they need to learn and how they need to learn to grow with Christ more, they're just going to run into a similar situation in just a little bit different area. And so when you see that and you're working with somebody as you're helping them grow, keep that in mind. A lot of times we tend to be short-sighted, so to speak, and we focus on this situation. Well, the event that happens normally is powered by a deeper issue, right? You can think of it like a geyser on the earth, right? The eruption happens here, a volcano. Let's use volcano. The eruption happens here, but there was some pressure and there was something going on under here that caused that to happen, right? Okay, and so we need to make sure that when we're helping disciple somebody, that if we see them struggling over here, something exploding, going wrong, then let's trace that back to the deeper issue and figure out where they need to have some help down in there, okay? Because there's something that's driving that, and we need to help them work through this issue, help them deal with the situation, but then as we disciple them, help them figure out what's going on down here that needs to be fixed too. Because a lot of times we don't. And then we wonder why they struggle and they struggle and they struggle and they struggle. So
now, with that said, generally speaking, when you try and fix that core issue, it hurts more.
Oh yes.
This game is not fun sometimes.
No, it's not.
But you will save yourself a lot of long-term pain if you just fix the core issue first. And another thing is not just fixing issues, but if you have a hindrance in the core, you will not grow. There will be no growth that is able to happen because your core is damaged.
Right. And that's exactly right. And so we need to go back and we need to learn. A lot of people, they don't recognize this, and so we keep trying to make people grow. And we've kind of mentioned this before, but sometimes you'll see people put people in positions of leadership to help them grow. No. Go back and figure out where they need to grow here, build that up, and the leadership will naturally come.
Yeah.
But until you build, there's a reason. If you're not seeing that leadership there, there's a reason it's not there. Because there's something going on back here that needs to be fixed so that would show up naturally on its own. And now, granted, I understand the idea that not every Christian has the gift of leadership. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about leadership as in living the Christian life, doing what the Bible calls Christians to do. That's what I'm talking about here, okay? So how does this work? All right, so when you disciple somebody, you begin by figuring out how their relationship is spiritually. Where is their relationship with Christ? Is it doing pretty good? Do they have some spots they need to work on? What are those, right? You start building that up. You start encouraging that relationship. You start stoking that fire. And then you kind of see through life on life where they're struggling next. What's the next thing? Are they struggling with their relationships in the church and how to grow in their service to church? Are they struggling in their relationships with their family and what's going on there? Are they struggling in their relationships with the world? Is there some worldly things that are trying to pull them away? Do they need to be strengthened? And you kind of assess, and as you disciple them, when you're meeting with people, you want to steer the conversations those directions. Here's something that I think can help you grow. Okay? And we need to help be aware and walk them through this process. Okay? And here's the idea. Unless you're willing to be, and this is something I think is so key, unless you're willing to be transparent about your own struggles, you will fail at this. Because nobody wants to feel like they're being held to a perfect standard that they can never achieve. And so part of being a discipler is walking with them, and when they fail, saying, hey, you know what? Yeah, you failed. Okay, we can do this better. But you're not the only person that's failed. I failed too, and this is how it looked, okay? So don't feel like this can't be, this is an insurmountable task. you can do it. You know, sometimes we're going to be those that have to encourage and lift up and do those kinds of things, all right? Because when we do that, we earn the right to be heard by them. And until you earn that right to be heard, you can talk and talk and talk and it will do no good. Okay? And so I want you guys to think about that. Now, one last thought, and then we'll have to close it up because we're running out of time. I want you to notice how he ends the book of Ephesians. He talks about this idea of putting on the armor of God and this whole concept of spiritual warfare. We need to be aware as disciplers that when we disciple somebody, it's not going to be this nice, neutral, have fun environment that goes on. Okay? Satan's out there. He's throwing fiery darts, according to this passage. Not just at us, but at those that we're discipling. And he wants to take back what's his. And if he can't take it back, he wants to wound it and kill it. I mean, that's his strategy. And so we need to recognize that this is not going to be an easy process. That this takes place in the context of spiritual warfare. And there are going to be some battles that we might end up getting kind of stung with. And they might hurt when we go through them. Right? And we need to be sure that we're teaching them that walking the Christian life and becoming a disciple is going to have some hard times. Some Christians, some people, they give the idea to new Christians that this is the greatest life that you could ever live and it's going to be so great. And don't get me wrong, it is. But that doesn't mean it's always easy. Because there are times when it's going to be really hard. And we need to prepare them for that.
I think we give them the image of victory, but we don't give them the years and years spent in training, laboring over the skills that you need to master in doing something. Mm-hmm. This is not if I just find the right idea in the Bible, then I will be a perfect human being. This is, I have to sit down and do the push-ups to build my body. Paul says, I beat my body into submission. Mm-hmm. This is a training process. This is work, and it hurts.
Right. And so one of the ways that I want to suggest to you guys that you can think about doing this is, you do this as you disciple them, and you talk to them about the different areas of their life. You sit down and you talk to them when they talk about being a disciple, and you explain to them the idea of Jesus in that relationship and how it affects every other relationship. And you kind of let them know a little bit of how things are going to work, and that it's going to affect all areas of their life. And now they have an understanding that this is going to happen. It's going to be a battle. It's going to be all these different areas. It's not just this church thing that I do on Sundays. And they get all this stuff kind of introduced to them early so that when these things come up and when these fiery darts from Satan come, they're not caught off guard. Because it's really, the easiest soldier to kill?
No idea what's going on.
The one with the least experience. Because they don't know. They haven't been through the battles. They don't know. Yeah, lions pick off the easiest prey. Satan is also compared to a lion, a roaring lion, seeking those who may devour. And so I need to be ready and warned and keep a lookout for him because Satan's going to come after him. He really is. And that's something we need to make sure that we impart to them. All right, we're out of time for today, but I hope that this helped you. I hope this has challenged your thinking maybe a little bit. And if it has, that's great. I hope you grow in your discipleship from this, and I hope that you're able to use this to grow in discipling other people. May God bless you in your efforts.